Okay, yeah, so I'm Frankie. I use they, them pronouns. I'm non-binary. I grew up in New York City, in Brooklyn, and I guess my relationship with New York clubs started before when I was still fully a child, because my parents met in New York in the 80s, and even before that, for both of them, going to clubs was really important. So I would hear stories from them about going to places like Limelight or going to, oh my gosh, I wish I could remember the names. I remember my mom describing a place where they always had sand on the floor. It was some kind of after hours club, and she would go there and then go home, take a shower, get the sand off of her body, and then go back to her job at a city government office. So, and I was hearing these stories as a young kid, so before I'd ever stepped foot in a nightclub or could even conceptualize what one was really, I had these ideas about this sort of magical world of New York that existed that I didn't have access to. I think because of my parents' deep love of music and the way that it connects people, that music was really important to me from a young age as well. And so as I've gotten older, I realized that DJing was kind of like a natural fit for me, because I'm just sort of like, the easiest thing for me to do is become obsessed with music and then dig really deeply into it. And then the thing I want to do after is tell everyone that I know about this song that I heard that I love, which is basically what DJs do with more steps, right? So when I realized that that was something that I could do, that was really exciting, and it really changed what I am paying attention to when I go to clubs, I guess. When I realized that I didn't just have to be like receiving, but I could potentially be giving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm trying to think like if there are specific times that really.
Yeah, but what was your first club experience?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I think my first ever club experience is really just like so silly. So I was probably like 16, and I had just seen a Star Wars movie in theaters, and then, through the grapevine, I heard that somebody, like some friend of ours or a friend of a friend, had a hotel room in the Standard, and he was kind of like, just sort of like a little baby Gatsby kind of character. He's not really great, but we were like, okay, let's go see what's going on over there. So we go, and it's just a bunch of teenagers in a hotel room, basically, being ridiculous. And then somebody has this idea, oh, we should go upstairs. There's like a club at the top floor. I didn't know anything at the time about that. So we go, and I'm pretty sure it was Le Bain, because that's the club that's at the top of the Standard, right? But I didn't know that at the time. And so there I was, kind of in like what you would wear to go watch a Star Wars movie in the theaters, visibly extremely underage in the queue to go into this club. And, fortunately, unfortunately, because I was like a 16-year-old, like seeming girl, the bouncer was like, yeah, go for it. And there I was on this rooftop, and I kind of immediately lost my friends by accident, but then I just was drifting, I guess, and there's like music playing, of course, and it was strangely calming, I guess. Like it was so stressful, the whole like, are we gonna be able to get in? What's even going on? Where am I? And trying to manage like the social interactions or whatever. But then to be like alone with the music, it felt like was very tranquil in a way. And so then I just kind of like danced for a while. I don't know how long. And then I left and tried to go back to the hotel room where people were, but everyone I think had gone. Like I had just been there for longer than I thought, I guess. Yeah, that was the first time.
And you enjoyed it. It sounds like it was the word, using the word tranquil is an interesting word to use to describe your experience on the dance floor.
Yeah, I think I've really found some of my deepest moments of calm in a way, like centeredness in my body on a dance floor, dancing, usually even by myself, where I don't have to worry about like what my body is saying or like how it's functioning as like a social device. I don't know. I have social anxiety, so, but so I can just like be dancing, and then it's like my body has like a different purpose that feels more intuitive.
And in a way, is it connected to the music? Because you were talking about your love of music initially. So is that the sort of physical manifestation of your relationship with the music?
Yeah, definitely. It's like listening with my whole body. Where it, in moments where I'm feeling anxious, just like listening to music, just that can be really helpful. But then to sort of extend the listening, like all the way to my fingertips, all the way to my toes, be like fully listening. It feels really good. It feels really good.
And so you said you're a DJ now?
Yeah, I mean, I have a day job and I DJ sometimes, and I also like doing radio. I was a radio DJ in college, which was some of my favorite sort of times with music in my life. Yeah, I mean, one thing I love about DJing is, again, I mean, in terms of like the social part, I get to be at a party, but I don't have to talk to anyone if I don't want to. Or I guess I don't have to talk in words. I can communicate with the people there in a different way. And I really like that. I can kind of participate without having to figure out something to talk about.
Do you have, like when you're doing that, it's such a beautiful way to describe that experience, because it is about the community. It's about this room full of people that you are communicating with and building community because you're entertaining them, I suppose, for lack of a better word. But I'm curious about this idea of social anxiety from interacting with people versus being the DJ and playing the music for everybody. Like you are a significant person within that room, within that experience. And so how is that for you?
Sometimes it's definitely nerve-wracking, for sure. But I think when I'm sort of like in a flow state with it, listening super actively to the music, which is just a really comfortable place for me to be, like giving so much of my attention to what I'm hearing. And then also just sort of giving the caring attention to the people in the room. I think the DJs that I admire the most are the ones who are sort of like caring for the people dancing. I feel like Eris Drew and Octo Octa are like a prime example of this, where they're really just trying to like draw the crowd out and see like what people are responding to and highlight that, like, oh, it looks like people are looking kind of gassed. Let me like calm things down for a little bit, give people an opportunity to like find their friends, recollect. Or people are starting to feel more energized. Maybe I can, elicit more of the crowd's like confidence, or elicit more of the crowd's like sensuality or sense of togetherness or whatever. Yeah, oftentimes just even seeing little snatches of interactions in the crowd, which I'm looking over at this stained glass here and I'm seeing the same thing, just where you see just like a little piece of a couple people dancing together or something, and that'll inform where I feel like the music should go next. Yeah.
It's like, I mean, you're orchestrating, you know.
Yeah, something like that. It's like very active listening to the people and the music.
And are you, what about the interaction within the club space? If you're DJing and there's lights and there's effects, there's the sort of the way the space has been designed, does that influence you? Does that interest you? Is it just sort of a secondary thing? Does it affect what happens in the booth?
Well, let's see. So definitely like pretty much all of the situations that I've DJ'd in have been very like DIY, I would say. Like the people that are throwing the party are the ones who are bringing this space into existence and figuring out, you know, like hacks to kind of like transform whatever space we have into something a little bit more like transportive. So I think for me it's more about the people and what kind of vibe the people are showing me more than the space. Like some of my favorite clubs I go to as a dancer, like they're pretty blank as spaces, but the people who show up there are full of color and texture. And so that often informs for me kind of like the aesthetics of the music.
That's great. I love that idea. How does that contrast to what you've heard about nightclubs from the past?
Sure, yeah. I mean, and even like nightclubs of the present, I guess. There's certainly homes for maximalism in New York and elsewhere. I mean, yeah, you know, like I hear about like, oh, like people like dancing in cages, floating, and I mean, you know, massive stained glass windows and things like that. And I'm trying to think what's maybe like the most maximalist club experience I've been in. I went to this club in LA one time. It was kind of whatever, but they really had spent a lot of money on like making the place look away. But I guess that was what let me down about it, is that it was sort of this like big room full of intention as far as how it looked, but the people didn't really like have very much energy, and it kind of seemed like they were just trying to like take pictures and be looked at. And for me, that's kind of like counter to my personality personally, and so I oftentimes feel more at home in places where like people aren't necessarily trying to be looked at, like, oh, no phones on the dance floor kind of thing.
Interesting. Do you want to talk about Martin's photos?
Oh my gosh, yeah, totally. So that's definitely like part of the mythology of me growing up is like the mythology of my dad as a young person who, you know, immigrated to the United States. I feel like immigrated is a strong word because that like makes it sound like there was some real like intentionality behind it maybe, but he just kind of like came without very much of a plan, and became interested in photography and was also just like interested in nightlife, and has always, I think, as an artist been interested in people and the way that people are and how they show who they are on the inside by dressing a certain way or putting out a certain vibe. And from a kid, I remember him telling me that he just like went to nightclubs in New York and took portraits of people. And because I first heard that when I was a kid, you know, it was normal because it's just a thing my dad did, whatever, right? But as I've gotten older and, you know, had my own creative pursuits, I now understand that was kind of gutsy to just sort of like walk into the situation knowing nobody and say like, hey, can I set up my gear in here and do these pictures? And in this particular case, the pictures that are in this show are from the world. He just was like, hey guys, like, can I take pictures in your club? They said yes. And so he took these portraits, like sort of formal, people would sit or stand for the portraits, of people who were just in the club. And when I heard about this show happening, those pictures immediately came to mind, because I imagined, having never seen them, that they probably captured something that I love so much about my club experiences today, which is like seeing the beautiful small details of the people around me, and learning just little bits of who they are. So I reached out to them. I was like, hey, I think if you can find those pictures, they would be a perfect fit. So we found them, and then getting them scanned and finally seeing them now, seeing these pictures, they just say so much. I feel like there's so many of them, more even than we could include in this show. And together they sort of create such a lovely, detailed portrait of like a chapter of New York nightlife, I guess. Seeing all these different characters, and down to some of the small details that you can't really see, like in the dark of a nightclub, like the sort of detail of somebody's like bolo tie, or the detail of somebody's eye makeup. I find them so intimate, and they make me really wonder where those people are now, and if they remember that night. Yeah.
They're beautiful, beautiful portraits. And what strikes me about it is, I think you alluded to it as well, where they got dressed up to go out, and they're mostly in the dark, or there's sort of ambient lighting or whatever that's every once in a while revealing who they are. But in those portraits, you really see those details as you described, and this is a person who's authentic to themselves, and they've dressed up the way they want to be seen, and that they have this beautiful record of that night, that time, and so it would be so fascinating to, if you were one of those people, to be able to see that image now.
Yeah. I wonder if someone will be like at the party this weekend and see a picture and be like, is that?
Right.
Like, oh, I know that person, or that's me, or that's my mom, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, the World was a big club too. I went there. That was one of the first clubs I actually ever went to. I didn't live in New York. I was visiting, and a friend brought me there, and I was just blown away how big it was. There is sort of you want to be seen, and you want to see all kinds of things, but there's an anonymity about it as well, which is kind of important, I think. At a certain times in your life, or a certain age, where you want to be able to disappear into a crowd and just kind of like feel it.
Yes. Oh yeah. The experience of being led to a moment with a bunch of other people, which I feel like that's really the job of the DJs, like garner the trust of the crowd so that everyone can sort of like trust fall into the music, and then be led to like a shared point of euphoria. This wasn't in New York, but like one of the moments that always like sticks for me in terms of like DJing can be just like an incredibly powerful thing is like, I don't know, late o'clock in the morning in Berlin at the club that's like it's like the basement offshoot of Berghain, in there with people from all over the world. And I know over the course of the night I've heard maybe like 10 languages being spoken, and it's just totally jammed in there. We're like sardines. And at one point he puts on like a Baltimore club remix of the song Hey Mr. Postman, like Mr. Postman, and the crowd goes insane, and like everybody knows the words, and it was just like this like crazy magical moment where you have like this really old song that's been like remixed and dislocated into like Baltimore club, and then transported to Germany, and then there's just like a crowd of like visitors from Japan, and another crowd, including me, of visitors from America, like screaming, dancing, singing to this song. And and we were all just led there by the DJ like getting us to trust, and they're like, nope, this is the moment. Here it is. Like, here you all are. Yeah.
Very cool. Anything else you want to bring up or ruminate on?
Let's see.
It sounds like you're very active in the club scene, still in the club scene, because you're DJing, you're aware of where these parties are.
Yeah.
The DIY thing is amazing because it's like, you know, making it happen.
Yeah, I really, I guess, maybe one thing I'll say is like a project that I worked on recently, more in like the radio vein, is I made this like sort of radio episode that I called the Gender Euphoria Mixtape, where I like went around New York and interviewed a lot of people with a focus on trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people, talking about like what gender euphoria means to us and what it feels like. And one of the things that emerged from those interviews, which I very much relate to, is like the experience of being among other queer people, being in an environment where gender is really expansive, where the idea of passing kind of disappears because gender is being played with like so much, or maybe it doesn't disappear, but like there's so much more space to play, I guess, in gender. And yeah, I think one of my favorite things about the club scene for me today is like queer people creating spaces where we can be anywhere in the space of gender and be beautiful and see each other being beautiful, feel beautiful, and dance together.
Wonderful. It's a great place to end.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frankie.
That was fun.